I once again took the plunge and read something that was popular on TikTok. And that has been very hit or miss for me in the past. Some books have been amazing, some books have not worked for me at all. Welcome back to StoryTube. What's the story? Today, I'm going to talk about The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a book that I've had on my shelf for years. 2-3 years or more, I am not certain. And it is a Greek mythological retelling, of which there are now hundreds of thousands, or that's at least how it feels. And I had never read one, and I was hesitant to read one, probably because they're so popular. And obviously I know that Madeline Miller is one of the ones that inspired this trend, so I figured if I'm going to read a mythological retelling, I'll start with Madeline Miller, Pat Barker, or Natalie Haynes. Like, they seem to be the three big names, at least that I can think of. If I'm missing someone, let me know. That started this trend, so that's where I would go to, because I'm always skeptical when there's a trend in fiction and suddenly all the covers look the same, all the themes are the same. I'm sure some of those copycat books are good, but there will be a lot of mid stuff out there. So anyway, it was always going to be one of the OGs that I would start with. But I think when something gets so big, especially when it gets big on TikTok these days, there is a little voice of prejudice in me that is just hesitant to buy into that hype, because I think often it can let you down. So, because if you've been following along, I've been struggling to really focus on books in the last couple of months and finish things and get really excited about things, I figured I'll go to my books that I've had for years and that I've been wanting to read for a long time and just use the opportunity to cross some of those off the list. And one of them was Song of Achilles. So to give you some context.
I'm so confused as to what we've been doing so far.
In terms of Greek mythology, I am not super well read, but I have read some plays and I've read some bits and pieces of the Odyssey specifically in college. However, I haven't touched it since then, since like 2017. So I also grew up like having some like kids retellings of it, your typical, like kids mythology. So like I was really into it as a kid, but most of that knowledge was very, very dormant. The first couple of chapters that I read, I was like, oh, all of these names sound familiar, but I have no idea who these people are. I'm sure there are little references and nods that she's doing that are going completely over my head, but that was not a problem. I think that you can read this book in particular without knowing anything about Greek mythology, and it might do different things for you, because if you read it not knowing what's going to happen, it's one experience, versus if you're very familiar with the myths and the stories, then it'll add a level of tragedy, of understanding what the foreshadowing is and knowing what's being referenced and what's going to eventually occur. But I think it works either way. I like this book. I hadn't actually said that. I really, really enjoyed it. I don't think I would say that I loved it, but I loved aspects of it. And it did get me really, really excited about Greek mythology, which was very, very cool. Like, I was reading it and it made me want to go and read the Iliad, and it made me want to read other retellings. And I had a moment that really clicked with me where I should probably say what this is about. So the Song of Achilles, it's shocker about Achilles, but it's told from the perspective of Patroclus, who, I think that's how you pronounce it, who is Achilles' who is his best friend, and in this iteration more than just his friend. And it really tells a story of them from when they're children and they meet up until their entire life, basically. And so we spend a significant amount of time, the second half of the book, at the Trojan War, and we have characters that we know from mythology, like big names. And there was a moment about halfway, maybe 40% into the book, where there's a bit of foreshadowing, or they say something one to the other, and I thought, oh, this is so tragic. I love it. And then I thought, of course it's tragic. It's literally a Greek tragedy. And I just had this moment of realization of, well, that is what the mythological retellings can kind of be. Just these great tragic stories told in a contemporary way. And it was just an aha moment of like, oh, I might really be into this. I love some tragic stories. So I really, really enjoyed it. I thought that the relationship between the two main characters, between Achilles and Patroclus, was well done. I thought some of the dialogue was quite beautiful and understated, but very impactful. However, I don't think the characterization of the rest of the characters was all that strong. But there were seeds of it in there. And I've heard from a lot of people that Madeline Miller's second book, Circe, is even better. And I can see that. Like, I can see a lot of potential in Song of Achilles. And it made me really excited to read Circe. It also made me really interested in The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, because this is set during the same time. So whereas Song of Achilles explores the idea of Achilles, the person, I guess, underneath his warrior demigod role in mythology, and this kind of explores, I guess, him being at the core a good person and kind of a naive person that is manipulated and pushed in a certain direction. And it's from an angle of ultimately a romantic story. Whereas Pat Barker is looking at the Trojan War from the perspective of the women. And particularly, I think the main character in this book is Briseis, who is basically a captured slave of Achilles. And in Song of Achilles, it's spun in a way where she is being treated well, but that would still kind of fit into how it's portrayed in the original, like I guess in the Iliad. Whereas here, from what I gather, I haven't actually read this book yet, that is not the case. And we're more looking at Achilles as a negative figure. So I'm very, very interested in kind of the opposite interpretation of this character and this situation. And this is very much a feminist retelling. And it's the first in a trilogy. The second one is The Women of Troy. The third one is The Voyager, I think, which came out this year. And Pat Barker, I think I've heard, is a very good writer, and she is meant to have quite nice prose as well. So yeah, it really kickstarted something for me of like, first of all, wanting to go back and reading some ancient Greek stuff and like the ancient, the epic poems and the plays, and refamiliarizing myself with these characters and these stories. But it also made me interested in different interpretations of them. So for that alone, honestly, I think Song of Achilles is worth a read. It is a good starting point for mythological retellings. Like I said, I don't think you need to have any knowledge really of what these stories and these characters are. It doesn't go super deep into the mythology. It is really at heart a romance, a tragic romance between these two main characters. Song of Achilles. On the spectrum of TikTok darlings, this one falls on the side of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo for me. This was a success. This is a good book. I do think it's worth at least some level of the hype that it gets. I wouldn't say go into it expecting the greatest book you've ever read in your life. But if you're interested in mythology, if you're interested in fantasy, honestly, and you want a nice story that is at its core just about people, doesn't go super deep into, war and the epicness or anything like that. It is really it's a romance. I don't see a reason why you wouldn't enjoy this book. It's competently written. It's a quick read. It's very compelling and easy to fall into. And that is kind of all I needed from it. I needed a book that carried me through to the end without running out of steam, which is kind of all I've been looking for in the last couple of months, and it's been difficult to find. So I'm very grateful to this book and that I picked it up, and I will be reading more Madeline Miller and more Greek stuff. So let me know if you read it. If you've read Circe, would you agree with what I perceive to be the general consensus, that that one is better than Song of Achilles? If you didn't like it, let me know why and recommend some more Greek mythological retellings. I'd love to know if there's any hidden gems that I maybe haven't heard of or that I have made assumptions about just because the covers all look the same. So yeah, let me know in the comments. I'll chat to you there. And subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet and you're interested in hearing more about what we're reading. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Let me think before I just ramble for no reason.